Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 540, and today's date is December 12th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Central Bankers Are Now Positioned to Loot Pensions and Bail in the Banks. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand Europe is struggling right now. They're in a recession/depression. Some of the countries are in a depression. A lot of them are hitting a recession right now, and a lot of the countries are entering a recession. And we can see right now Greece is having a huge amount of problems. They might enter a Cyprus-style prolonged bank holiday, and Goldman Sachs, which is part of the central banking system, is warning Greece about that if they vote wrong. In the event of a severe Greek government clash with international lenders, interruption of liquidity provisions to Greek banks by the ECB could potentially even lead to a Cyprus-style prolonged bank holiday. And we understand what happened in Cyprus when this happened. The people woke up Saturday morning. The banks were closed. They said, we're on a bank holiday. We're going into capital controls. You cannot remove any of your money, but don't worry. It will be only for 2 weeks. And we're only going to take about 8% of your money, and we'll replace it with bank stock, even though it's worthless. We'll replace your currency with bank stock, so don't worry about that. Well, 1 year plus went by. The people couldn't remove their money, and they actually ended up taking about 47% of their funds. And we can see right now this could be happening in Greece. Should the parliament fail to elect a president, general elections would need to be held. And we can see right now they're very worried about this. And we have to think back all the way back to when Greece was bailed out. They told us everything was going to be fine. And right now, what's happening? It is not fine whatsoever. Now, this is spreading to many countries throughout the Eurozone. I mean, Germany's feeling it. UK is feeling it. And right now, British construction, their output suffered an unexpected sharp fall in October. I like when they say it's unexpected, like it just came out of left field. Even as growth in preceding months was revised up and handed a slight boost to overall economic growth in the third quarter, construction output fell around 2.2% in October after rising by the same amount in September. The Office for National Statistics said on Friday, total house building in October fell about 0.8% from September. And you have to remember, the real estate bubble is being blown up here in the United States, along with other countries, Canada, UK, the Eurozone countries, Australia. You can see the real estate bubble is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what's going to happen when this thing pops? Every single country is going to feel it. And we're starting to see countries and the central banks come out and say, yes, there are some properties or real estate that is now overvalued. And we can see right now here in the United States, they are overvalued, and we see prices starting to come down. We're starting to see mortgage applications, refinance applications, new sales, existing sales, all declining right now because the system cannot keep it going. They can't continually pump up the bubble. They're going to try, and of course, come this January 2015, Fannie and Freddie Mac, they're going to pretty much introduce loans to subprime people. They're going to say you only need a 3% down payment, and they're going to try to push this bubble up even further. They're doing the same thing in the auto industry. Right now, they will give a loan to anyone that has a heartbeat. They don't really care. You don't have to put any money down whatsoever, and you can drive off with the car. And this is why we see delinquencies up about 80%, and we see the repossessions are skyrocketing at this point, but the dealers don't care. The automobile manufacturers don't care. They've received the money from the banks, and the banks are holding the notes right now. But again, every time they try to do something, it never goes as planned, because when you put garbage in, you get garbage right back out, and this whole thing's going to fall apart. But as the United States and the central bankers, as they continually push gasoline prices down, everyone's feeling like everything is fantastic. I mean, I've been talking to people and they're like, oh, it seems like the economy's getting better. Gas is coming down. It seems great. We're just going to wait a little bit longer, see how far down they go. And it looks like the economy is really getting much stronger. And you can see this by the UMich consumer confidence. It has gone euphoric. This is the highest since 2006. And what happened in 2008? We had a recession. So right now, People are feeling good. We're in a holiday season. Gas prices are coming down, and they're continually pushing it down because they're trying to get people into the retail market. They're trying to get people to buy things, stuff, and they're having a very hard time getting those people out there. And you have to remember, most of the people, they don't have work. Most of the people are underemployed, and they're pocketing the money right now. And basically what's happening, because I know I'm doing it, I go to the pump. Instead of filling it up right now, I'm putting half in. I'm not going out saying, oh, I have this extra money, let me go to the store and buy a gift. It's not like that. I'm going in there and saying, oh, I just spent a lot less money on half, or I'm spending the same money and getting a full tank. So I think this is what people are actually doing right now. They're not going out and taking this extra money and spending it. I think they're saving it. They're being very cautious because they know what happened in the past. Now, right now, producer prices fell by 0.2% in November, more than expected. They thought it was only going to be about a 0.1% drop. This is the largest wholesale deflation since October 2011. This leads to a 1.4% year-on-year PPI, the weakest since March, and it has fallen for the 7 straight months in a row. So we can see right now things are not going well whatsoever. Now, we have to remember there are a lot of companies laying off, and there's a company called Halliburton. This is a Houston-based company. They are laying off about 1,000 jobs. Now, one indicator that lets us know how we are doing is completely falling apart. It's imploding right now. It's the Baltic Dry Index, and I reported on this in many different reports. And we understand this is raw material that is shipped, and it is used for factory production. And right now, we can see that the Baltic Dry Index is continually falling. It has fallen now to 887 points as of December 11th. This is getting very close to the recession Baltic Dry Index of 647. So we're not that far off now, and they're telling us that we're in this amazing recovery. How can this be if we were in a recession around 647 points or so, and we are at 887 and it's continually falling? Something is not jiving. Something is wrong. And let me just say, at the height right before 2008, when everything was absolutely fine, the Baltic Dry Index was at 11,793 points, and when the recession hit, it came down to 647. We are at 887. What does that tell you? Now, we understand the central bankers, the governments, the countries around the world. We realize, and they realize, the collapse is coming. I mean, not everyone realizes this, but the people who are awake, listening to alternative or new media, they're realizing that, yes, it will come. When? That is the question we really don't know. But we can see by the indicators and everything the central bankers are doing that we are leading up to it. Why would they be doing this? Like a bail-in document. Why would they need that? Why would they need a bail-in document if we're in a complete recovery? Why would the bankers need to slip into a spending bill protection for the derivative market? Why would they want the FDIC to insure the derivative market? Why would they want a bailout from the taxpayers? The reason for all of this, the reason why DHS is buying billions of rounds of ammunition, supplying tanks, fatigues, machine guns, surveillance equipment to all the local law enforcement. The reason why the federal government now is getting involved in nationalizing the police forces around the world, around the country, is because they are preparing. They understand the collapse is coming. This is why the Treasury Department right now is out there, and they're supplying survival kits to their bank representatives, and they're spending a lot of money on these. This is why the government has been increasing the number of police forces around government buildings. This is why the government, the central bankers, are trying to provoke war around the world. This is why they're maneuvering and moving military assets to Eastern Europe, to the Pacific, to Africa, to the Middle East. because they realize and they understand that they're going to start a war to cover up this collapse. They all know this. And right now, they are getting set for a major bail-in. They're getting set to loot the nation of their pensions. Pension plans to be looted nationwide as Congress okays institutional theft of funds. They're protecting them. They're protecting themselves. They're getting ready. They understand that this major collapse is going to occur. Remember back in 2008, what did they say on the floor of Congress? They needed a bailout. Or you will see civil unrest, you will see rioting in the streets, and we will not be able to control this whatsoever. So you have to give us the money. It was basically blackmail. That's what they did. They blackmailed the government in giving them money. And we can see right now they're doing the same thing, except they're doing it through laws, where they're protecting themselves. They're central bankers. They have no allegiance whatsoever except to themselves. And right now we see they are protecting themselves. They don't care about the people. They don't care if the people go to war, they die. That means nothing to them. And you can see by their actions. Forget about what the government says. Forget about what the central bankers say. Look at their actions. That will give you the truth. Now we see a lot of countries are getting very nervous. They see the dollar collapsing. They understand the dollar is not going to last any long. I mean, think about it. In 2015, the IMF is going to look at the yuan renminbi and they're going to put it through some tests to see if it's a reserve currency. Most likely it might be. Of course, the United States central bankers are not going to let this happen. They're going to try to stop it. But again, we have to take a look and see what's going on. A lot of countries are repatriating their gold. Venezuela, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, and now rumors of Belgium and Austria. So we can see countries are getting very nervous. They want their gold back. The Austrian State Audit Court says central bank should address concentration risk of storing 80% of its gold reserves with the Bank of England's standard reports, citing draft audit report. Court advises central bank to diversify storage locations, contract partners. Given the high concentration risk in the Bank of England, advise the examiner to rapid evaluation of all possibilities of better dispersion of the storage locations. Not only the parties to be diversified, but it should also come to the actual spread of the storage location. Austria has about 280 tons of gold. Only a small part of them, 70%, are kept in Vienna. 80% of the reserves are located in London. The main trading for gold, 3% in Switzerland. So we can see right now they want their gold back. Many of these countries have received their gold, or they're waiting to get their gold, or canceled it because the central bankers put pressure on the government not to do this. And we can see right now there's going to be a lot more countries come out and say, you know something, we might want to get our gold back, and we are definitely going to see this occur as time goes on. Now, what's happening out in many of the countries, they realize the collapse is coming, and they're trying to limit the amount of free speech, limit the amount of news, limit the amount of protesting you can do. And when we look at the countries, I mean, here in the United States, we realize that they're creating free speech areas, you know, those fenced-in, caged-in areas. We also see that they're searching more and more people. They're violating their rights. Now, Congress has passed a law where they can, or they're going to pass the law eventually, where they can just spy on everyone's communications. They really don't care anymore. They're violating every single right of the people. And this is the time where the people say, you know what, enough is enough. We have had it. But out in Spain, there's a new law in Spain that requires every Spanish publication to charge services like Google News for showing even the smallest snippet from their publication, whether they want to or not. Well, Google is not going along with this, and they're shutting down the Spanish news operations. Basically, what they're trying to do is limit the amount of news stories in this region. And they've come out with even another law, and this is a strict anti-protest law. Remember, Spain is training cops the police officers for civil disobedience. Spain has narrowly voted in an anti-protest law, which the government argues will ensure public security, but opponents say will restrict civil liberties. The law, which has been called the gag law by opposition groups and the media, was passed in the lower house of the parliament on Thursday by 181 votes, 4-141 against. The Citizens Security Law gives sweeping powers to the authorities. Any unauthorized protest outside buildings that provide basic services to the community will incur a fine of up to about 600,000 euros. That's $746,000. This covers a huge number of buildings from universities to hospitals. There will also be 600 euros fine for showing a lack of respect to anyone in uniform, while the photographing or filming of police officers where they could be put in danger will incur a 30,000 euro fine. So we can see right now they are preparing because they realize there's going to be a lot of protests, there's going to be a lot of rioting, and we can see a lot of these countries are starting to do this right now. I mean, the United States has these laws. You cannot protest within a certain number of feet of a government official. You need to have a permit in certain areas in Washington and be a certain number of feet away from government buildings, and they're pushing it further and further away. They're doing this on purpose. They're doing this because they're nervous. They're afraid. They're afraid of the people rising up and removing them from power. This is why this is all happening at this time. Now, as we know, the CIA torture report came out, and it was a couple hundred pages out of thousands upon thousands of pages, and those are being kept secret. That, they don't want the public to see this, and I can just imagine what's in the meat of that, because what they gave us is really absolutely nothing. And we can see right now from what they have given and what they're showing the people, it's showing us that it's not only the U.S. that has been torturing or who is involved in torturing. It's mainly the private Western Central Bank countries. I'm sure that all the countries are doing this and they're hiding the torturing, but we can see right now the private Western Central Bank countries who sit there and say, no, we don't torture, we want democracy, we want freedom, we would never do this. Well, it's turning out that it's actually completely the opposite, and every time they told us that the United States government was not torturing, they actually were. And again, like I've always said, whatever the government officials tell us, it is always the opposite. They love to lie, and once they lie, they put a lie on top of a lie, and they lie again to cover that lie. And we can see right now from the U.S. torture report, it pretty much exposes the European powers' involvement in the crimes. I mean, even though the European states' complicity in CIA torture and rendition operations has been documented for nearly a decade, no European official has been held accountable. Actually, the officials here in the United States are not going to be held accountable. Everyone's just sweeping it under the rug like it doesn't even matter. We can see right now that the British intelligence was in contact with the CIA prior to the publication of the Senate report on torture published earlier this week. Downing Street confirmed the UK asked for information to be redacted on national security grounds. The statement contradicts those made earlier by the British government, which denied any involvement in U.S. torture operations. Now, Judicial Watch obtained documents, and these documents are from 2010. As some lawmakers purport to be stunned over the new CIA torture report, the fact is, Congress knew for years that enhanced interrogation, or we should call it torture, techniques were being used on terrorists, and in fact dozens of members were repeatedly briefed on the subject, including former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Back in 2010, Judicial Watch obtained government documents, once marked top secret, that revealed between 2001 and 2007 the CIA briefed at least 68 members of Congress on its interrogation program. This included so-called enhanced interrogation techniques, which they, of course, renamed, which is really torture. The dates of all congressional briefing, and in some cases the members of Congress in attendance, as well as the specific subjects discussed, are included in the files. Pelosi, who was publicly denied she was briefed by the CIA on the use of these techniques, is specifically referenced in a briefing that took place on on April 24th, 2002. Enhanced interrogation techniques were not effective, and the CIA provided extensive, inaccurate information, and this is coming from the report. So we can see right now all these government officials continually lie to the American people. Now, I'm not going to say every single one of them, but I'm going to say about 99% of them. Maybe there's 1% that don't lie. But we can see right now they're all involved in this. And we understand under the War Crimes Act, they should be brought up on charges. But we can see from the Obama administration that nothing is going to happen whatsoever. They're all going to keep their jobs. Everyone's going to stay in their positions. And no one is going to be charged with a crime. Maybe they'll find someone that nobody knows and they'll just dig him up and say, okay, we found one person and he's responsible or she's responsible. But right now, it seems like they're going to do absolutely nothing here in the United States and in all the other countries. Okay, now we talk about rioting, protesting quite a bit, and we know here in the United States they use agent provocateurs. They've been using it in Ferguson. They try to gin up some type of rioting to get the police forces out there, to show the militarized police force, to push the man down so he doesn't fight back, to show that the police, the government, are in control. And right now, out in Oakland, it looks like an undercover cop in Oakland pulled out a gun and pointed it at protesters Wednesday night after they exposed him and a partner as police officers attempting to incite crime. They were dressed up just like the protesters. They had masks on. They were trying to do things to get the protesters going. The shocking moment was captured by Reuters photograph Noah Berger, who was covering the protests spurred by the Michael Brown and Eric Garner cases. Reports indicate that two police officers were posed as protesters while wearing bandanas over their faces. Others in the group were looking at them and started to realize that, hey, they weren't legitimate demonstrators. And they began pointing at them and yelling, hey, they're undercover, they're cops. And we can see right now, these undercover agent provocateurs were throwing things at the building, trying to get all the people involved in this. And this is what we've been talking about for quite a while now, that the government will use agent provocateurs. They will pay them to dress up and look like a demonstrator. They will come into the community. They will throw things, use fire bombs, anything they possibly can to get the people going. And most of the time, almost all the time, they're not from that area. They just came in, they did something, and they leave. And it seems like witnesses at the scene claim that two undercover cops were attempting to rile up the crowd and get them to vandalize properties and loot businesses to get the rioting started. And they were caught, and people realized what was going on. And this is why everyone needs to be ready and needs to understand, when you're looking around, look at things that really shouldn't be there. Who are these people? They're not part of the community. Why are they doing it to local businesses? We live here. Why would they destroy the local businesses in our community? We decided to go out on a peaceful protest, and all of a sudden these people showed up and started doing something. Everyone needs to start asking questions and look at their footwear. Look at the clothing they're wearing. Why are their faces covered? These are indicators that these are agent provocateurs. Now, out in Afghanistan, we understand, and we've been talking about this for quite a while, that the U.S. troops, NATO troops, they're really never going to leave. Yes, they're making it look like they're leaving Afghanistan. They're not going to be coming back. You have to remember, Karzai wouldn't sign the bilateral security agreement, which would give immunity to the soldiers there in Afghanistan. They have poppy fields where the CIA and the U.S. government use it to sell overseas. They sell it as opium to pay for their covert operations. We understand there's huge deposits of oil, lithium, copper. The Chinese are there, the Russians are there, and they're never going to leave this area. And right now, we are starting to see that NATO is basically having a combat mission now in Afghanistan. So they're removing their soldiers, and they're bringing in 12,000 strong, and they're calling them advisors into Afghanistan. And this is a mission called Resolute Support. They will train and advise and assist the Afghanistan law enforcement, security, and military personnel. Now, we have to understand the United States and NATO have been in Afghanistan for how many years? 11, 12 years, and now they're deciding that they need training? Something doesn't seem right. The UN Security Council voted Friday to approve a new NATO mission in Afghanistan starting January 1st, 2015. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said on December 1st, the 12,000-strong non-combat mission dubbed Resolute Support will train and advise the Afghanistan law enforcement, security, and military personnel, and they will get them ready to secure Afghanistan. And we can see right now that most of the time when this happens, these advisors usually stay in the country. They direct the Afghan forces, and if things get out of hand, guess what happens? They are ready for combat. We're seeing it now in Iraq. We've seen it in Vietnam, the same thing. They started out with advisors, and all of a sudden those advisors turned into combat-ready Marines ready to go. We're seeing it all over now, and they're pre-positioning the forces. We know that the United States is leaving forces in Afghanistan. Actually, they're adding more forces in Afghanistan, and we'll see this ramp up in the next year. Now, we understand out in Ukraine, the ceasefire is holding at this point. Both sides confirm this. They're moving some of the military, the heavy military, back right now. But something, to me, just doesn't sit right. When I start looking at many of the reports and the indicators, it seems like Ukraine, Kiev, the central bankers have something up their sleeves. Ukraine says it will dramatically increase the number of its conscripts to 250,000 and boost its military budget in 2015 to deal with the ongoing conflict in its eastern provinces. Well, if they have a ceasefire and they're looking at peace right now, what would be the purpose of this? Where we foresee calling up 40,000 men in 2015 and training 10,500 people who will do their service as professional soldiers. This is coming from the Ukraine defense minister. He added that the total number of armed forces would increase from 232,000 this year to 250,000 next year. So they're preparing for something, and they're training their people. Now, right now, we understand that there were neo-Nazis during the coup. We saw them. We saw pictures of them. We understand it was a coup. We understand the United States government central bankers were in charge of this along with the EU. And we can see right now that there was a amendment in Congress. This was introduced by John Conyers in May. And the amendment says that the Rules Committee of the House of Representatives would bar U.S. funding to neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine. So basically this is saying, yes, there were neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and now we're creating an amendment that would bar any funding to them. But guess what happened? It was buried, and no action was taken on it whatsoever. They want to fund these people. They use them as their proxy army to do their bidding. And we can see right now, they're on a war path. They know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to get the war started. They will not allow anything to stop them. And right now we see U.S. Congress is now virtually 100% all in on Ukraine's war against Russia. Last night, the U.S. Senate voted, and they voted 98% to join Ukraine's war against Russia and against Ukraine's own ethnic Russians in Ukraine's southeastern districts in order to eliminate those resistant to the new puppet government. The U.S. is now throwing down the gauntlet to Russia's President Putin and daring him to defend openly the ethnic Russians that the U.S.-installed Ukrainian government is now trying to exterminate in the eastern districts. The places where the present Ukrainian government is rejected by almost all of the residents. Both the House and the Senate bills are for not just arms, military supplies, but specifically include lethal weapons. And they aren't just to send, but they're going to donate them to Ukraine, because we know Ukraine is bankrupt. So they're going to give them all these weapons. This was mentioned once before, but now they can do it. So they are receiving weapons of mass destruction. I mean, the government likes to tell us this, that these countries have weapons of mass destruction. Well, now they're giving weapons of mass destruction. The Ukrainian company, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Ukrinmash, has signed an agreement with a U.S. company, Barrett Firearms, on supplies of weapons for the needs of the National Security Service and the National Guard in Ukraine. U.S. Congress, which introduces changes to the law on foreign assistance of 1961 and recognizes Ukraine as well as Georgia, Moldova, Washington's main allies outside NATO. Barack Obama now has the option of sending Kiev weaponry, primarily anti-tank and armor-piercing equipment. The U.S. government has allotted $350 million for this purpose. The bill also grants the U.S. executive branch the power to procure and transport emergency fuel reserves to satisfy Ukraine's needs, including reserve gas supplies from Europe. U.S. President the right to introduce sanctions against Gazprom now and other Russian companies. So basically, they're pushing this war forward. They are getting ready. Now, Putin was in India, and he visited India, and he made 20 high-profile deals, and both sides ended with a 100 billion commercial contracts in these deals, and he did this within 23 hours. Norway is out there, and they're saying that they will not resume military cooperation with Russia, which was frozen in March this year, till late 2015. And this is coming from the Norwegian Defense Ministry, because as we can see, the war drums are getting louder. We can see countries are taking sides. They're getting ready for what is coming, and they understand that this is definitely coming. Now, it looks like the EU is considering new sanctions on the government in Libya. Not the puppet government, but the elected government where the people took back the country. And we see that in the Middle East, things are really falling apart. The central bankers are getting very, very nervous on what's happening. And this is why they're looking to impose sanctions on those leaders. They're also changing the payment system so they cannot sell the oil to other countries for other currencies, or gold, or silver, or anything else. And we can see right now they're getting very nervous. They do have bases surrounding Libya. They're setting up certain bases, and they're getting ready to do something inside Libya. And we can see right now, as the Islamic State spreads to all these countries, they're going to use the excuse that the Islamic State is in these countries, and the United States, once the bill is passed where they can go anywhere the Islamic State is, they will then say, we can go into these countries. And remember, they're watching Libya very closely because they believe it is a hub for the Islamic State. It is a base for the Islamic State. Now, yesterday we reported that the U.S. government is not paying the Free Syrian Army at this time. The opposition sources said that we are not receiving payment. Payment stopped in November. And I said maybe they're doing away with the Free Syrian Army in this area because we understand they're training a new army, and the Islamic State is the proxy army of the UK, of the United States, Israel, and other Arab nations. The administration said they acknowledged that the U.S. aid to rebels did not threaten Assad regime. On December 10th, a senior official said the United States determined that the civil war in Syria must be resolved through diplomacy, so they're stopping payments for the Free Syrian Army because they are not doing what they thought they were able to do and get Assad, and they're looking at other alternatives at this point, and they're no longer paying them. And of course they're using it, and they're saying that we want this through diplomacy. No, this is not what they want. Basically what's going to happen is they're training other forces. They have the Islamic State and the worn out Free Syrian Army. They're just going to discard them. That's it. They're done. And we can see they are pushing and getting ready to push forward. Now, the U.S. Congress pretty much is going to has passed a cybersecurity bill clearly outlining the power of the federal authorities in cyber threats management, as well as updating existing laws in accordance with the emerging threats prompted by the recent Sony hack. The U.S. House of Representatives passed a National Cybersecurity Protection Act of 2014. The cyber bill passed this week is a historic moment in the fight against cyber attacks. This is coming from Representative Michael McCall, head of the House Committee of Homeland Security, where now the Homeland Security is handling all cyber-related missions and handling the protection of the country. So we can see right now they are definitely getting ready to go full force with this false flag event. DHS is now in charge, and there are warnings coming out of DHS, and I thought this was very interesting that DHS said 100 million Americans could lose power in a major sun storm. And we know that the sun sends out flares and it could damage the electrical equipment, but they come out with this warning. Document says FEMA unsure of damage to grid from magnetic storm. Millions of Americans face catastrophic loss of electrical power during a future magnetic storm that will disrupt the electric grid and cause cascading infrastructure failures, according to the Department of Homeland Security document. DHS, Federal Emergency Management Agency FEMA, stated in an internal 2012 fact sheet outlining its response plan for severe space weather that the actual impact and damage from a future solar storm is not known. An analysis of the space weather impacts indicates that greatest challenge will be to provide life-saving and life-sustaining resources for large numbers of people that experience a long-term power outage from damage to the U.S. electric power grid. The FEMA fact sheet noted the finding of a 2010 study by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the agency that monitors sun storms, warning that an extreme solar storm could leave 130 million people without power for years and destroy or damage more than 300 hard-to-replace electrical grid transformers. Now, we have to remember, this could also happen with a cyber attack. They already reported that if there was a cyber attack, they could take out the transformers and they would be hard to replace. The study said a future solar storm like the Great Magnetic Storm of May 1921 would black out most states east of the Mississippi River, along with most states in the Pacific Northwest. The long-term loss of electrical power likely would produce catastrophic loss of life. And we have to remember, Janet Napolitano, when she was leaving office, what did she tell us? It's not if, but when. So the question is, why do they keep telling us this? Why do they keep reminding us and letting us know about power outages across the country? They had reports about cyber attacks, they have reports about magnetic storms, and they continually tell us that it would damage the infrastructure of the United States. They couldn't replace the transformers for a very long period of time, and people would lose their lives because of this. And there is definitely a reason why they're doing this. They are preparing and getting ready for this major event that they're going to pretty much create out of thin air. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.